Hey everybody, we're here with a new look at The Last of Us Part 2. We've got Anthony and Kurt from Naughty Dog here. We're going to be running through that new trailer, and we are going to be seeing what we can learn about all the new gameplay and mechanics that are teased that we saw there from a significantly older Ellie. So let's get to that trailer because I want to start digging through it with you guys. But first of all, I want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
There's been a huge reception for this game here at E3. The gamers have embraced it. It's racked up millions and millions of views on YouTube. So we're going to take a closer look now. But what's the first thing that goes through your mind when you see this trailer now? I mean, you've been working on this game for a long time. It's now out there in the public. And to just see sort of the reception behind it, what does that mean to you?
So the whole team has just been working super hard on the game and on this trailer and demo in particular. And we're just so excited to finally be able to share what we think is super amazing with the rest of the world. And we're really hoping with this trailer that people can kind of get what is happening with Ellie. Like has the opportunity to be like a normal teenager. We're seeing like kind of this sweet teen romance that she's able to have. And also kind of just get a glimpse, just like a small glimpse of the vast number of new mechanics and new player abilities that we're going to have in The Last of Us Part 2.
I liked the being in the room, the physical church that was built for the press conference.
Right.
That was really rad to see the press kind of shuffling in and being very confused about what this space was. And then the record scratch and the thing, and then the black lifts, and we see the crowd seeing the room that they're in on the screen. And they're like, whoa, this is this eureka moment of like, oh, yeah, I get it. So it was really awesome. Something that we didn't get to experience when we're looking at this thing a million times. To see it there with 1,000 people in the crowd was pretty rad.
The response in the room was just electric. Like, I was just over the moon with the response in the room. The people were cheering, people were kind of gasping, and with all the intensity and stuff. So it was really great to be able to be a part of that.
And what was it like to revisit Ellie's character for Last of Us Part 2? Because it's rare we see a character grow, both physically and emotionally, across a series. So, how did you approach the design of Ellie differently for Part 2?
So for Part 2, I mean, it's 5 years after the first game, and Ellie has been forced to survive in this world for 5 years. She's picked up a lot of lessons from Joel, but she's had to learn a lot of stuff on her own.
Yeah.
So she doesn't have the same kind of impressive physicality like the raw bulk that Joel has. So she's had to be a lot more kind of creative and strategic in using her agility and using every resource at her disposal to kind of overcome these overwhelming odds. So that's why she's able to dodge enemies in order to handle multiple enemies at once. We're seeing that very kind of kinetic melee system that we have. It's a lot deeper than the original. That's why we've added a jump button to kind of add verticality and a little bit more of a platforming element to her escapes. So just in general, her moveset is a lot more creative, a lot more agility focused, but still extremely deadly.
I personally like that we age our characters kind of over in real time. Like we did similar thing with Uncharted 4 with like an older Drake, and kind of similarly here we get to see as we've aged as developers, and the character gets to grow up with us. So I don't know, I'm excited that we get to see Ellie as in her late teens.
And I got to point out just the technical mastery here on that kiss. That is extremely difficult to make a kiss between two non-human characters, essentially look that realistic. So incredible job there. And we're going to dive into a little bit of the gameplay that we got to look at here. Tell me what the overall design goal was for this game. Where was your head at?
So overall, we're really inspired by sequels that take risks. We like it when sequels don't just make incremental improvements over the prior success. With this game, we really wanted to take a hard look at every subsystem in the game, question all our assumptions, and ask ourselves, like, how can we take this to the next level? How can we make a quantum leap with this system? So it's just like one small example, the stealth system. We've introduced analog stealth. So it used to be kind of binary, whether an enemy could see you or not. But now the combination of the stealth foliage, the foliage that Ellie is able to move through, and her stance, whether she's standing, crouched, or prone, those two factors combine to kind of influence how well enemies are able to see you. So it creates a much more nuanced, kind of deep system. And we've kind of taken that same approach with melee, crafting, traversal, just across the board with all the gameplay systems.
Sort of a higher fidelity in these systems that we know from The Last of Us Part 1.
Both in terms of the choice that is available to the player strategically, but then that choice is represented with the Naughty Dog level of fidelity.
Yep.
So
I mean,
it's kind of like those
gorgeous.
two pieces,
Yeah.
create the experience.
Excellent.
Yeah, just something like going prone sounds simple, but the vegetation it allows us to do and the different combat spaces it allows us to create, now we have to think about, oh, the enemy AI now has to check under things, and there's all these new interesting areas that we can let the player go, and how to use prone in a variety of situations, going inside vegetation, going under cars, being on top of something and being prone to hide from an enemy below. So yeah, something that's simple, and then there's like all these interesting gameplay things that we can get out of it. So it's like those, where do we get those big wins for what we can do in design and really push, give the player more breadth of strategy and options.
Ellie is obviously a very accomplished survivor now. So how do you strike that balance between making the player feel empowered when they're controlling Ellie, but also making the world feel like an incredibly dangerous place to be?
I think the thing is that we've escalated both. So you'll see that the AI is even smarter than the first game. You can see them constantly coordinating with each other, relaying the knowledge that they know about. You can see them referring to each other by name, kind of even showing the depths to which we're trying to represent these as like real intelligent humans. And then at the same time, Ellie has become even more capable, between the dodge or her new crafting items like the explosive arrow, giving you kind of this very deadly long-range option. So by bringing up both at the same time, we're both increasing the tension. But every way that the player is able to deal with these challenges has to be strategic. You have to kind of be creative and use every resource at your disposal in order to overcome these very intelligent enemies.
One of the things I want to point out here is this melee combat is Ellie has this ability to sort of dodge very quickly. She's much more nimble than Joel was in the first game. So tell me a little bit about how that melee system kind of comes together in The Last of Us Part 2.
So we really, again, wanted to kind of question our assumptions about the melee system and ask ourselves, what can we do to make this deeper, more complicated? So by giving the player a defensive option, it's really like adding a whole new dimension to the melee combat. So it's almost like going from 2D to 3D. So not only does it give the player the ability to manage multiple enemies at once, it really creates just a system where you need to know when is your time to go in and when you kind of have to play defensively and back off. And one thing I think is really cool is that we're able to bring the depth kind of other, like a more traditional melee-focused game, but kind of pair it with the fidelity of a Naughty Dog game. So whenever she does a dodge, there's this whole pretty intricate system where it examines the direction of the incoming melee strike, and she does something contextual that is always kind of, that honors where that move is coming
That's
from.
That's a great detail. That is some high-end stuff there.
It also allows us to have different weapon types that the enemies use. We see the bigger guy at the end there with his big pickaxe.
Yep.
And he's got a kind of a different set of things. He's blocking attacks. So blocking and parrying is a feature of this new system. We have dodging and different types of weapons. We have smaller handheld weapons and then bigger two-handed weapons and these really big weapons. So there's all this different complexity of how the weapons interact with each other and how the bigger enemies can swing and interact with the environment, hit things and knock them off. And then, yeah, he can pick you up and throw you through the environment all systemically. So it's really exciting to really develop that in the heat of a stealth encounter. To be able to have these melee engagements it just adds another, like Anthony said, it's like going from 2D to 3D of, the depth of combat.
Every time I watch this, I just see new visual details in animation and lighting that I didn't notice the last time.
I mean, it seems like no matter how bad it gets in these combat situations, there's always something you can do to escape. You've always got an option. I mean, how did you design the game in such a way that it feels like that you're on the edge, but you're never completely down?
So it's, again, it's a very desperate world. It's very high pressure with these very intelligent enemies. But one thing that's kind of important for people to realize about this demo is this is just one possible playthrough through this space. So I think at any given time, I think Perceptive viewers will notice that like the player didn't have to go this way. They could have gone this completely other way. She didn't even have to go into this store. So kind of the combination of these very wide, kind of lush environments with the very intelligent AI that kind of is able to coordinate and react to every choice that you're making, along with kind of this new suite of player abilities. I think players are going to be surprised at kind of the very emergent, unique moments that they're able to get based on their own choices in the space.
How stealthy can you be in it? Could you technically sneak through this entire area without engaging any enemies at all?
I mean, one of the goals for us is we always like when you can stealth by. And, one of the pillars of this is to give the player as many options in combat, and one of those options is to not fight. Yeah. So, depending on the space, depending on the story, depending on a lot of things, but we always want to encourage, whatever play style the player chooses. And yeah, like you mentioned, escaping is like a big thing, and we always want to feel like every space has somewhere to escape to or a way out where confrontation isn't the only option. So that's kind of built into all of our levels, the hiding places and vegetation and just escape routes in general.
And escape is always like kind of a critical part of The Last of Us, like kind of core combat loop. So it's about these like moments of extreme tension when enemies don't know exactly where you are. When you get discovered, it kind of explodes into action, and you're kind of like forced to like fight very actively for your life. But then with kind of the new features like the jump button or being able to squeeze through tiny gaps or prone under stuff, we've like kind of increased the depth of even just running away from your enemies. It now has kind of a lot more dimensionality to it.
No, we got a quick look at the crafting menu there as well just a few seconds ago, and we heard you mention, and we saw sort of results of explosive arrow. So I'm curious what the thought process is around crafting at this point. I know you guys are still deep in development, things can change, but where are you thinking in terms of crafting?
We wanted the Last of Us 1 has like a very elegant crafting system. And, for us, that core trade-off of, even just the recipes and what you can craft and how the things overlap, we've expanded it so that we can have some new elements to give the player a broader range of options, but also have these overlaps in the recipes. So even, in the heat of combat, when it's like, I can craft these two things, but if I craft this, I'm going to lose this, and holy crap.
Do I heal, or do I make a Molotov cocktail? It's the classic example.
That classic example kind of layered in more depth in the crafting system.
That's terrific. Are you still looking at having, and again, this is early days, but upgradable weapons? That was something that was a lot of fun to play around with in the first game as well.
Yeah, we have upgradable weapons, and like we said, different craftable ammo types. So yeah, we're going to be talking about more of the player upgrade stuff. We're rethinking again, challenging all our assumptions about player upgrades, weapon upgrades, and we'll be talking more about that in the future.
With craftable ammo types, what's really cool about it is that it kind of creates this connection between the crafting system and the gunplay system. So we really like trying to bridge these gaps so that different systems can synergize and interplay with each other.
Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself or anything here, but we did see human enemies in this. Presumably, the infected are still running around, making people's lives difficult. So what can you tell us about just sort of the broad strokes of how you're approaching that?
So we can't talk too much about the infected, but we can say that they still are a very big threat in this world, and that we will be featuring new types of infected in The Last of Us Part 2.
Cool. Good to hear.
I mean, how open is the world? We saw the combat situation there, and you've mentioned that the areas are quite big, and you can approach situations in multiple different ways. Like, was that a goal of yours, to make the environments feel bigger and more open?
Yeah, this is the first Last of Us on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro. So we're taking that idea of, giving the player more options, giving the player a little more width on some spaces. It always, of course, depends on the story, depends on the tension we're trying to get in a given moment. But yeah, and also the idea of kind of seamlessness is just something we always try to push for in our games, and that extending into the layout of levels and where a combat space is and where isn't a combat space. What is an explore space? What's a combat space? Kind of blurring that line a little bit and making sure the player's on their toes as far as like where a threat could be in the world.
This is something that Kurt's been pushing really hard on, which I'm a super big fan of, is this sense of like kind of never really knowing quite when a combat space ends and the next one begins. And not only does it mean that there's this very consistent sense of threat, but it really strengthens the sense of place and the sense of immersion that the player has, because you feel like without kind of the, oh, this is a combat space, this isn't, which even if it's subliminal, I think players pick up on, by kind of making it a little bit more analog, a little more seamless, you really feel like you're in these locations.
It's great. Game is obviously looking fantastic, and Kurt, one thing I did want to point out as well is, you had a key role in Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, which introduced a lot of this sort of more open sandbox feel, and I would imagine that some of that would sort of rub off, so to speak, on The Last of Us Part 2. I mean, has it influenced the development of the game, or do you see them as different things?
I mean, we always, every project you work on, at least at Naughty Dog, you look at that genre, you look at that game, and it's, what is the best thing for evolving that franchise? And obviously, when we work on different projects, it's not just me. A lot of almost everyone at Naughty Dog works on every single project, so everyone learns a little bit, even if it's just some tech thing or
Sure.
some technique of how to do something, and then it gets brought over to the next project. So in a lot of ways, yeah, like The Last of Us 1 has influenced Uncharted 4, has influenced Lost Legacy, and we just kind of keep building on what is useful and what does make sense to bring the skills that we've developed in making something for Uncharted into making something that's specifically for The Last of Us.
That's awesome. So very much its own beast, The Last of Us, as it should be. Looking fantastic, looking just gorgeous. I can't wait to play it. We know you guys are still heavy in development, so we won't get into release timing yet. I know you're not ready for any of that, but Rob, do you have any final questions for our guests?
I mean, I just can't wait to play it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is for me. Like, when do I get to play?
No, I think actually, the thing I'm so stoked about is, if you just look at this demo and you imagine a whole game that is like this,
Yeah.
I just get so excited about that prospect.
Absolutely.
I'm so proud of what the team was able to accomplish with this, and can't wait to reveal more about the game later. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, well, thank you, gentlemen. Very impressive new look at The Last of Us Part 2. Learned a lot more about mechanics and systems and just how the game plays, and it's no surprise that it looks right up to Naughty Dog quality bar there. So great job. Can't wait to see more.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, fellas. Yeah, thank you.
And we'll be back with
Thanks.
the closing moments of the PlayStation Live from E3 presentation. Stay with us.
PlayStation